Welcome to another episode of Rockets Talk. We know it's been a minute. We have to take a break, take a vacation. You know what I mean? Off season for us too. So we are back.
The Mastodon was out of office. Let's just
You were in Cabo or Cancun or we did 1, 2, 3 Cancun after the Rockets started losing. We were out of there, but we're back, man. And it's been so much, bro, that we've it's gone on since I think our last episode. So we're gonna try to get into some stuff for you guys to try to catch all up, and then obviously we'll be here to rock with you for the rest of the off season. So the Rockets finished out their season a nice even 500, bro. How do you feel about that? Like, how do you feel about the season just overall?
success. I mean, it's hard to spin it any other way, right? I did not imagine when I looked at that roster. I thought one of two things. Either one, there's no way they win 41 games. I thought there was no way they'd win 41 games. Or two, one of these guys becomes a superstar and maybe you win 41 games, but they won 41 games. I mean, they didn't finish under 500. So that's a success in and of itself. You had multiple breakout periods from multiple guys between Sengun, Jalen Green, Amen Thompson having a run of just putting up some crazy stat lines. Cam Whitmore being a valuable rotational piece off the bat. Tons of success stories across the board. So I'm happy with it. What about you?
I would say the same because my range for the team was 35 to 40 wins, and even though it's successful, it felt nastier than 41 wins like going through the season.
Yep.
I don't know how to describe it. I guess a lot of y'all probably feel the same way. It's like we got to 41, but there's still, to me, a little bit of me that feels like we underperformed as a team. And I think we've heard Coach Udoka refer to it that they've given away games. And I feel the same. I feel this team is actually better than 41-41. But my biggest thing is the development, as you pointed out, for the players, bro. Like the seeing Sengun go on the run he did before he got injured, Jalen coming on late and kind of like at least making us feel better about, what we saw from the early part of the season. Jabari, I know a lot of people give Jabari grief. I think in context of where he was his first year under Steven Silas, he took a huge leap. Yeah. Just being a rotation player, bad on some nights, but at least a rotation player that you're like, damn, they're starting Jabari again. Like I didn't question Jabari starting
right
this year. So I
will say Jabari this year is what I kind of expected last year. But he was good. He was a good player. He is a rotation player. I agree with you. So we have confirmation that Jabari Smith, his floor is a guy that can probably start 82 games and contribute. So that's good. I just thought,
you think how he had a good stretch to end last year, but he was really bad, bro.
Bro, he was one of the worst rookies I've seen since Evan Turner.
Damn.
Yeah, I think he blocked me when I think I did tweet something.
You said that,
and I think that's why he blocked me. But anyways, about Jabari specifically, I thought he was going to come in as a rookie and kind of be what he was, shooting wise, defensively, efficiency. So it's nice to see that he did that this season. So anyways, continue with your point. I just pointed that out.
Yeah, so I think just the internal development, the rookies, how they came on, and I think Coach Udoka just working his magic. We finished top 10, number 10. We escaped out of, not being a top 10 defense this year as the wheels almost came off to end the year. But I'm pleased because it does give us a lot of joy going forward about what we can look forward to from these guys. And I think the expectations now is if you set your baseline with this team, with Jalen playing bad for a majority of the season, with Sengun being hurt for the last 2 months almost, for Tari being out, Jabari being up and down, being benched and things like that, and injuries for 41 wins, then, I mean, we should be better next season. But, I think overall the season was a success. What was something that you were surprised about this year that for me, was the defense? What was something that surprised you about what you saw from the team?
That's the easy answer. It's the defense. It's just we watched them in preseason and I thought, oh, they're pretty good. They're playing pretty well defensively. And I thought, okay, top 15 would be cool. But they were legitimately a top 5 defense when they were healthy. I mean, for real. And
yes,
even until the end, they were like a top 7 and 8 defense until they just didn't have enough bodies down the stretch, right? And they got into those fast-paced up and down games. And they still finished 10th. To the point of it being like you said, if it was 41 wins, but it felt dirty. I think that's just the nature of the NBA these days is some of these wins are going to be against Portland's G League team, right?
Right.
And some of them are going to be against the Mavs on a back-to-back resting Luka and blah, blah, blah. I mean, the first, month of the season, every team we played was benching one of their like top 2 or 3 guys, you know? We played the Kings twice without De'Aaron Fox, right? We played the Lakers, I think, without AD. And so you win some of those. The good thing for me, the biggest, most important sign for me is that when they were healthy and they were playing a good team, they played for real, and they looked every bit like they belonged in those games, and they won some of those games, you know, and they might have even won some of those games missing an important piece or two. They definitely won some of those games without Tari Eason. So to me, like I think they've shown, and this can get us maybe into our next topic, but I think they've shown that they might have what it takes to be the team. And I don't know if they'll be a contender, but I think that this is a playoff. I think they could be a playoff team. If they ran it back, I think they could be a playoff team next season. If they ran it back and stayed healthy.
I agree there. And I mean, you think of some of the marquee wins, the Denvers of the world, those big wins, beating Phoenix, beating Sacramento, a team that, you know, was trying to win, trying to get playoff seeding. I do think that a lot of the games that we won this year were big games against good teams. The Pelicans wins, a lot of them come to mind. The Oklahoma City game. I think even though the stretch, in retrospect, you know, I kind of suspected that some of the March games we would come back down to earth in April because the competition. It was
let's just be
a
clear.
lot of bad teams.
Let's just be clear. Unfortunately, it was a Mickey Mouse March. Unfortunately,
yeah. I mean, nobody.
But it happens in the NBA. But they played the Wizards twice, and one of those games, the Wizards didn't even have Kuzma and Denny Avdija and those guys. They played the Blazers. They played the Spurs. They played Utah twice without Lauri Markkanen. Blah blah blah. Even Oklahoma City, and it was an awesome game, but they didn't have SGA. So continue though.
Yeah, but I mean, you play who you play, and I think that those games, because of the leverage of the moment, especially that OKC ones, the other teams, there were some real nasty tanking going on. But as far as that,
very nasty tanking.
But it just shows that the team is. I like what you said about them being a team that you felt like they belonged. I think every big game, for the most part, some games we did get spanked pretty early, but most of the games, I'll say 90% of the games we were in, and those 5 to 10 games that we lost were because of 1 or 2 possessions of a young guy missing a free throw, a young guy, making a bad defensive, missing a rotation, getting a bad foul, not hitting a shot that they normally do, or, you know, turning the ball over. So these are the things that you can develop and grow from going forward into next season. So
to be fair though, some of those losses were from like a Dylan Brooks unnecessary foul on a 3-point shot or something.
Oh my God, yes.
So we had some
or Coach Udoka. Coach Udoka too. He had some bad. Jay Shante, close out for me, bro. Kind of left us out there, Coach. You did trick off, to quote Rafael Stone. You did trick off about. Did you see Ime's facial? He kind of frowned a little bit when he said that. I don't know if you noticed that.
I didn't, but when I heard the words "tricked off," I was like, "Huh?"
I was like, "What is this?" Stone is definitely a '90s baby. But all right. So speaking of Stone, your favorite GM in the NBA, Roosh, was just secretly.
Hey, let me tell you, Rafael Stone has made the corporate attorney to an NBA GM pipeline. I mean, the dream is real. He's a pioneer for me. So,
oh man, Rafael Stone is the lawyer's version of like the rapper out the hood. So all of them are like, all the kids in the hood, like, I can make it. All the lawyers are like,
bro, I could do it. I swear. You know,
just let me get in. I'll do your contracts. And once but anyways, he got an extension. Weirdly enough, it was mid-season. I never heard. Somehow, some way, it never came out. Him and Eli Wittes were extended in the secret tunnels at Toyota Center in the dark of the night with bat's blood and whatever else Tillman used to sign him to the extension. But he did get extended. Obviously, my grievances with Rafael Stone are well documented on this channel. This year, I've taken a different approach, and we were talking about this a little bit off here. The way I view him, bro, like, to me, I'm going to give him a chance. I think this offseason is very important for Stone. And the extension to me for a front office executive is it's almost like just filing your taxes. You just have to do it. There's really nothing he's done that he's made mistakes, but there's nothing he's done that's catastrophic to this point. But the
Nothing that has
extension
been
for
nothing that has been catastrophic, but there were a couple things that could have been, and at a certain point
yes,
in time, it was like, whoa. But the
so
Rockets were able to
he's
move
been
on.
lucky. He's
Yeah.
been very lucky. But one of the things that you're gonna see with these type of front office people, extensions are irrelevant. Like he's still gonna be graded on what he does because there's no cap space for an employee outside of the basketball court. But I think I do agree. I'm okay. I kind of expected them to extend him because I think the 41 and 41 is appropriate for this team, given where the marker was at 31 wins. I think the development we saw from the young players gives you some confidence in their ability to go forward. And I think the most important thing is he's next to Ime Udoka. I think
Yep.
Ime Udoka buffers a lot of the things that Rafael lacks. And there are certain people in any type of walk of life and business that they are really good at one thing. And that thing is what they do. But if you give them too many responsibilities, they don't really perform very well. I personally believe Stone is really good at like contracts
Yep.
and getting deals done. I'm not sure how he identifies talent. I can't speak for his development philosophy on players, but I trust Ime Udoka for that. So in
Yes.
that sense, when I look at Rafael Stone as the guy that can, if Ime likes a player and suggests to Stone, hey, let's go get this guy, I trust Stone to get the deal done. So that's kind of how I see their relationship, and I trust Ime to bring the players we bring in to put them in the best position to succeed. So I do have more confidence. If this was Steven Silas sitting next to Stone talking about an extension, I'd probably be a San Antonio fan right now cheering Wemby. But
so
yeah,
so look,
feel about
I think you broke it down really well. So 41 and 41 is a success, period. It's a success. Him getting extended is not a surprise to me. I think he deserves to get extended based on what they've done, right? What I said was before the season is I said I'm going to judge him after this season, right? So at one point when we did the last segment that we did about him, I don't know how long. I think it was before the hot streak in March.
that.
Things were looking very unsure, right? Uncertain in Houston. Too many questions in Houston. We were under the Rockets were, I think, several games under 500 at the
Yeah,
time,
like
and
4 or 5 games under 500. Yeah,
yeah, and it was just kind of like, I don't know, not inspiring. It was, and then it kind of changed. And what do we do now? But they finished the season 41 and 41, and we got all the things that we talked about. So he deserves the extension. Obviously, Kevin Porter Jr. situation could have been terrible. Making the coaching hire, right? Had they decided to keep Steven Silas, hiring Steven Silas in the first place was catastrophic, and it took getting a top 5 guy like Ime Udoka to come in and fix it to make this possible. So that's all the context, right? At one
yeah,
point, it was like, damn, what are they doing? And then they made the right moves and pushed the right buttons, and they have created the 41 and 41 product that we got this season. So things changed quickly, and they were looking kind of bad, and now they look good. So you got to give him his credit. And I do think that Rafael Stone next to Steven Silas, a coach like Steven Silas, or even had it been a coach like Frank Vogel, for example, I don't know. I don't know how that all works as a everyone together. But Rafael Stone next to Ime Udoka, I think, could be a very good pairing. I mean, apparently the guys that this front office has drafted, and some of the guys that they signed in free agency, some of the decisions they made, and trading for Steven Adams, for example, you could tell from the presser that Ime was excited about Steven Adams.
yeah,
That's what it sounded like to me, right? So Stone went out and got his guy. So as a tandem, Stone graded against someone else that was not of Ime's stature. I don't know. Stone graded next to Ime Udoka. We might have something, right? So I'm cool seeing him extended, and it's also it gives you stability, right? It's like it's not another moving piece. It's not another. All right, well, what are we going to get? What are we going to get with this new guy? What's this search going to be like? Are the Rockets having to blah blah blah? So you keep what is in place and working together, and if it continues to get better, then obviously that's the hope. So I'm cool with it, man. And like I said, it's a corporate attorney becoming an NBA GM, so
right.
the dream is still alive. So
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just like if you look at it from a basketball standpoint, there are certain players you could pair next to a player like Jokic or LeBron, and it enhances what their particular individual skills are.
Yes.
compared to when you make that player like the Jokic or LeBron of your team, then you're in trouble. And I
You
think
could
with
be
Steven
you could
Silas,
be Derek Fisher next to Kobe and
right?
Powell and Shaq, or you could be Derek Fisher on the Jazz or on the Thunder or
Yes,
something. So it's like,
yes.
sorry.
It matters, and I think with Steven Silas, he probably felt like he had to overcompensate for certain things that were lacking, and I think that's where. So I'm really glad he got paid. Eli Wittis, shout out to him as well. He
Oh,
also
let
was
me say, Eli Wittis is the Rockets value him so highly, and fans should too. I mean, I
yeah
think without Eli Wittis, the operation doesn't look the same whatsoever, and I think the Rockets clearly know that. And then also, I was going to say to the point of Udoka with Stone, I think Stone needed someone to kind of, you know, direct traffic for him because like Steven Silas was not clearly not able to do that, and then you kind of leave Stone to himself. You don't know what you get. But with Ime giving direction and obviously probably saying, "Hey, I want this player. These are the types of players I want. This is the kind of basketball we're going to play." Blah blah blah. I have a lot of faith in Stone to execute Udoka's vision based on this
right.
season. So
Right. So, I mean, one of the things he talked about during the presser, which we'll talk a little bit more, but one key thing they did ask him is about does he feel like we have the current roster to compete, or is he going to be aggressive this offseason? This is a question that's come up a lot for Rockets fans about what should the Rockets do? Should they go get a star? How do you feel like this year, given what we just talked about with the 41 and 41, seeing how the season ended, some of the games we struggled in? Do you think, as we are presently constructed, do we have enough to compete in the West this coming season,
I think
next year?
so. I think so. And I'll tell you why. Because we just saw Oklahoma City and Minnesota come out of nowhere and finish what, top three, both of them, right?
Right.
Now, obviously they have Ant Edwards and Cat and Gobert, but who's to say the Rockets don't have something like that cooking, right? OKC has SGA, top 5 player, top 10 player. Rockets don't have one of those, so you could differentiate there. But it's still a young team, that's immediately competing. And so yeah, if they can get better, if they can just take, an incremental leap, like we don't need major leaps at this point. And that's the good news. We don't need like this astronomical leap. Now, that is making sure though that what Jalen Green did this season is for real, right? He came down a little bit back in April. Coach Udoka called it a hot streak. So hopefully it wasn't a hot streak. Hopefully it's like for real. But assuming that's the case, yeah, I mean, you have Sengun, you got Jalen, you got a guy like Amen Thompson that has a huge impact. Fred was awesome. Dylan is still kind of, Dylan, but you have him. We didn't even have Tari Eason. Jabari still has some growing that he can do. Steven Adams is around, which I think is a presence this team has sorely needed. So I don't think it's necessarily a discussion of, all right, man, what superstar do we go get? I think that model is kind of changing a little bit based on some of those teams I mentioned, right? Like the Wolves' big trade was for Rudy Gobert, who's like a defensive specialist, Obviously the Thunder traded for SGA, but everything else around that team they built from the ground up. So yeah, I don't know, which makes it weird. What do you do with that Brooklyn pick? Do you draft someone again? I don't know. I think it's unclear to me what they need to do other than continue to grow from within. But I think that's also encouraging.
Yeah, I think one of the things we got to keep in mind also is the West, and the context of the teams in the West. And even one of my things, though, I do agree with you, but as far as like the players, I think internally, if we had just regular year to year over the offseason development in our players, I think we have good enough talent to compete. But for the goals that the Rockets have, me personally, because I think that the West is so loaded, we could get better and still end up 500. I personally think that the Rockets need to improve their bench.
Yep,
And this is
definitely that.
when I'm talking about the bench. I'm talking about love Jeff Green. Jeff Green, Aaron Holiday, Tate should be what Hinton, Jonathan, and Boban are for our team
Correct.
next year.
Correct.
In order for a young team that does not have a SGA, if you don't have a top 5 guys, you got to rely on really good players 1 through 9 or 10. So that means you don't lose almost anything from your first to your second team. And that's the model Oklahoma City wins with a superstar player, is that when they bring guys off the bench, Isaiah Joe, these guys are elite at what they're supposed to do. Like if you're a shooter, you're a great shooter and you're going to shoot more often than not good from the field on a night-to-night basis. There's not these wild variations in performance where a guy's unplayable for stretches and then they have a good 2 weeks or whatever
Well,
like
hey,
that.
let me ask you this: Steven Adams, Amen Thompson, Cam
Right.
Whitmore, Tari Eason. Is that a good bench?
Yeah, I mean that's a great bench, but what is that lacking there? You know what I mean? So
It seems to lack. Well, what is it lacking? I don't know. So it's got a big defensive center. It's got a kind of Swiss Army knife, playmaker, secondary playmaker, transition defensive stopper, and Amen Thompson. It's got Mr. kind of everything, Tari, who's just going to get downhill and go. And then you have like an alpha scorer type with Cam Whitmore. It doesn't have a point guard
that's
unless you
one.
think Amen. Yeah.
Shoot,
Unless you think
well, a
Amen.
man can play the. To me, they're going to need their version of a off ball guard that can get them into sets and where a man can be used as what coach called where he's doing other things when the ball's in his hand. That we
Yep.
still need shooting. And as much as I love Steven Adams, I'm going to keep saying this. He is still a drop big. And so far, if you add him to the roster just as is right now, we have 4 drop bigs on our roster.
Yeah. But Boban's still under contract?
Okay, let's take Bo. So it'll be 3 drop big. I think Boban may have a option. I don't know if he's a team option. He's
I'm going to
expiring
look
this
this
year.
up. While you talk, I'm going to look
Yeah,
this up.
but we have basically if he's still here, it's Boban, it's Londale, it's Steven Adams, and it's Sengun, who even though they're all different in little ways, to me they're similar. And I still think even though we love the small ball 5 with Jeff Green or Jabari or whatever the bench units they want to do, I would love to have on the roster a type of center that is tall, at least preferably close to 7 feet tall, is athletic and can defend the rim at a very high rate to come off the bench. And you factor in the fact that Steven Adams is coming off of a major knee surgery, even
Yes.
though he's quote unquote what I call weight room healthy, where he can squat and do all the stuff he wants to do. There's a difference between that and playing a game in New York one night and then flying to Milwaukee
So
for.
I agree with you, but in the presser, Stone said he was asked if Tari and Adams were on track to basically like make training camp or something.
Yeah, but
And he, no,
make
no, but
training
he
camp.
but he said like easily. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
But
I
he,
mean, yeah, they
the
can
way he
make.
said it was like, no question. But
Dude,
yeah, I
they
agree
can
with you.
make training camp, but if you're not in basketball in NBA shape and you haven't pushed Tari I'm not worried about, but Steven hasn't pushed that knee to the
Yeah,
limit yet. No
yeah, I
matter
agree.
what you do in practice with your trainers and 3-on-3, it's not the same as when LeBron is charging down. You got to change direction, explode to try to
100%.
get so the flare up, swelling. You don't know where all these things could come. So just back to the bench thing. I just think we need just more skill guys that are specialists in what they do. We have all these like Swiss Army knives to grow. I love and Amen Thompson is no brainer. Like Katari, no brainer. Cam Whitmore, no brainer. Steven Adams, is he going to play 15, 20 minutes to start the year? When does he ramp up to his level? So I just think we need a bench to really, really help us. And then with the minutes thing, it's not really about the starters and the bench. It's like how can you put together combinations that you could maximize everybody's talent in different ways? Is there a lineup where you do have a 5 that is athletic? So as Ime said in the press conference, when you do want to run fast, right? Let's not just do it with small ball. Can we get a high pace lineup with a Nick Claxton type that you can run and have a lob threat out there where you're running and get into sets real fast? Or you want to get a Shangun centric kind of a Kings thing where you put shooters around them. Do you have a movement shooter on your roster that you could trust? I know you floated the Jabari thing is, but that's theoretical right now.
It is.
Or what the
It
Stone
is.
said, conceptually, or whatever you
Which is
said.
which is why I'm so pissed off that we haven't found out yet, right? Because if you got one in house, you don't got to go worry about wasting assets to find one. But you're right; it's theoretical. I think it's there. I think he's shown it, but has he consistently shown it? No. But he could solve the movement shooter problem. It bugs me that like they haven't
But
tried it.
but do you see him as the same movement shooter as like a JJ Redick? I'm not saying the skill wise. I'm talking about process of how they get their shots. When I say movement shooter, I mean
Yeah, you're talking
the
about run them off drags and screens
screens.
and curls.
Yes,
Yeah,
one
no, yeah, I
guy.
know. So that to me is a matter of one, it's simply is conditioning, and two, mentality. Like you just have to think. You have to change the way you think, right? For example, and I always do this. I always pull examples from playing pickup basketball, and I don't care. because I think there's some relevant concepts and you just extrapolate to the professional level. But this is what I do. When I'm playing with different levels, right? If I'm playing with people with better point guards, better ball handlers, I will change and I am a movement shooter. I turn into one. And it's all about how you think about the game. It's all about looking out there and saying, okay, it's not Auburn anymore. The rock is not in my hand and I'm not taking dudes off the dribble and pulling up from the elbow. How can I impact this game? Well, let me just run around like a bat and catch and shoot, because we know he can catch and shoot. We've seen it. We know he can, but the question is, can he do it in a designed fashion? Can he do it possession to possession? Can he do it 4 quarters, right? 82 games. Because it's a conditioning thing to me, and then a mentality thing. Which is like a totally random separate discussion. So I don't want to, kill our combo, but to answer your question, I think he could do it. I just think they'd have to get his mind in that space. Now, the other question is that the best way to use him for his development? I'm starting to think maybe because he doesn't have the handle, he can use the handle. He doesn't have to be a strict JJ Redick guy, but incorporate some of that, right? And then I think that makes it easier for him to drive as well, because he doesn't have the kind of handle to like just take dudes off the dribble, ISO, straight up traditional ISO style, So anyway, those are my thoughts.
I personally think he's too big for that. I can see him in like split action movement where he comes straight off a screen, and like MPJ from the Denver, where he's like, well, MPJ does run a little bit, I guess. But more shorter space movement. I would love to have the JJ Redick type out there just for spacing, but just overall, I do think that we need to the roster down the line needs to improve, because one, injuries are going to happen, guys. You can't count on a fully healthy team, and then when those injuries happen, do you have another secondary system you can go to that you can depend on a night in, night out basis? I loved how we played to end the year, but to me, that's not sustainable. You're not going to be able to turn every good team over and get into transition. You can't eat off of transition as your bread and butter. That can be your dessert. That can be, a side dish, but your main thing got to be the main thing. And I think the main thing next year is going to be some 2-man action between Sengun and Jalen, and whatever chaos comes from that. What do we do other than that? And I think that's what Ime and Stone are going to have to address.
But to be clear, I agree with you, right? I think they can make some upgrades like to the bench. But do we both agree, or what do you think about like going out and trading for a star?
No, I don't see. I mean, I don't see one that is that's available this year. I'm all for trading for a star if it's the right star. Like, what is a star? Like, I would love Paul George on the roster. A guy like that
at this age,
I think, and he wouldn't even be a star. Like, I think, but he's a big enough player, like a player like that. I'm just throwing out a name. I think adding that level of talent to the roster, of veteran, is, to me, that's a move that, okay, like we can do something, but that's going to cost you something. So it's always going to be the price of what you're willing to pay for those guys.
That's right. I mean, like Donovan Mitchell, I would say no.
Yeah,
right? I'm not interested in 6'1", 6'2", right, high usage, high scoring guard that's a defensive liability kind of thing. You know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I think they have enough to start competing. They got to tweak the bench. Someone floated Chris Paul as a backup point guard to me.
Oh, man.
At first I said no, and then I was like,
I would love that.
I was like, yeah, that would be pretty awesome, right? So like when you think about those 4 players that I mentioned, Steven Adams, Tari Eason, Cam Whitmore, and Men Thompson, what are they missing? They're kind of missing Chris Paul, right?
Yeah, you put like Chris Paul out there. Oh yeah, isn't Chris Paul like well, I think he's made the play-in every day, or playoffs, because he missed the playoffs this year for 19 straight years, or some crazy number, or 12 years or something like that. It's been like since 2000, early 2000, since he's missed the playoffs up this season. Obviously, the situation with Tillman and not Stone, but what's his name, Daryl Morey. I don't know if Chris Paul holds grudges still. I know he's probably still hurt. I hear him talk about it every podcast he gets on about Houston. But to me, yeah, an organizer like that off your bench, that gives you a whole second unit. He did that for Golden State. I think the Paul George thing, it would be that Dylan Brooks position. That is definitely he's a movement shooter that Jabari could be, because he comes off of one screen, but he can do it flying off and getting straight into his jumper. The defense is there. So to me, that's the tier. As far as like the Luka and the Zion, those mega. I don't think we're ready to even insert one of those type of players in this roster because if we had made the playoffs this year, and then you start looking around, and let's say we are in a position where we're a frisky first round exit or something like that, then you might get the itch to do that. But a team that did not make the play in, I think what the Rockets are trying to do, slow play it, is the right approach. And to me, slow playing doesn't mean don't do nothing. Like you can't just say we're going to come back with our whole team next year because I don't think this team is good enough to compete when you got San Antonio's going to up the level. SGA and them boys ain't going nowhere. Zion, he got hurt. He had 40 in that game when he got hurt. Zion is coming back with the Pelicans. Lord knows what moves they're going to make. You still have, LeBron as long as he draws air.
But let me play devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
You got James Harden needs to get extended.
Yeah, Clippers might.
Kawhi and Paul George might be free agents. I'm not sure. The
Warriors
are going to lose Clay, and they might lose Clay, and they got to make decisions, or they keep them, and maybe they're just not that good again. The Lakers are getting older, and they haven't had a great year. We'll see what they do in the playoffs. Who am I missing in the middle there? OKC, Minnesota, Denver, Clippers, Lakers. Oh, Sacramento. I mean, they're good, but they're not they haven't proven to be, dominant contender type. So I don't know. It could be open.
It could be. The West. I mean, the NBA is funny. But I do see a big shift coming in talent as far as who's going to be at the top. I think teams like us, we're in position in the next 2 to 3 years to become the contenders of tomorrow. While the Clippers and Suns of the world, what Ime referred to, and we'll talk about the press conference coming up. It referred to as
Suns, Mavericks. Yeah.
Suns, Mavs. Luka's only like 20 something. So if they keep Luka, they're always going to be in the conversation,
right?
Because you can just add different people around them. But Suns, Warriors, Lakers, Kings, possibly. You got all those teams that are going to be phasing out, while you got the Minnesotas of the world, OKC, hopefully us. San Antonio, I think, is coming. I think Memphis, they might have something to say about it. New Orleans. So it's going to be a tumultuous time. I just feel like the combination of eternal development and peripheral roster moves right now, I don't even need any big. I would love Paul George, don't need him, is to me the path for us to put ourselves in that top 6 for that. Unless Jalen or Alp literally take the all NBA leap, which, is, it's not impossible, but I don't think that's the easiest way or likely right now.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, look, I always say this, people forget this league is graded on a curve, So you could have you have some awesome talent, but is that talent better than the talent around it? And if so, how much better are they? Obviously an 11 and a 12 seed is not going to cut it, even though 41 is a success. And even though had they not been hurt, they probably could have won a few more games. Right. And maybe have made the playoffs. So yeah, it's tough because the league changes every year. Trends change every year, right? I mean, 6 years ago, we thought the center position was extinct because of the Rockets and the Warriors. And that's the opposite of that has happened, right? The center is kind of having a renaissance in today's NBA in some ways. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that they have enough to be serious. I don't know if they have enough to contend, but they have enough to be serious and to win, to be 46-36 next season.
Yeah.
Or, something like that, right? 50 wins, who knows? So yeah, that's where I'm at on it.
No. So one thing, obviously we watched the press conference with Stone and Ime Udoka, and there were a lot of different sound bites that came out of it. So for you, I'm going to ask you first, what are some things that stuck out to you about the presser between the two?
Man, I just like Ime Udoka. What stuck out to me is listening to that dude talk about, your team, because you can tell he's being very blunt and very honest. It stuck out to me how he said that he sat down with Tillman and Patrick. And when he talks about making his decision, he's like, I sat down with Tillman and Patrick. I thought that was really interesting. I thought it was interesting how everything he talked about basketball wise is when you look at what Ime was talking about, and then you go look at the conversation on Twitter, it's just kind of hilarious because Ime is telling you, we intentionally got faster after the All-Star break, and Alperen was a part of that. He's telling you I wanted to take them. This was a team that was last in turnovers. And then this season, he says something about finishing top 5. I didn't stat check that. I don't know if it's true. But he talks about limiting turnovers and leaning on Fred to get them into sets and not wanting to play fast at the beginning because he didn't want to turn the ball over and get other teams in transition, which is what these Rockets did the last 2 seasons. So you can tell, I guess my answer to you would be my main takeaway was how intentional Ime seems to have been about what he was building. You can tell that he came in, he talks about breaking down their habits, right? You can tell he came in to break down their habits with the plan of starting at ground zero and then gradually building them up. And it sounds, based on his answers, it sounds like they grew up a little bit faster than he expected, which is good. And then after the All-Star break, they turned it on and you started to see some different things. And that's what I got from his answers.
Yeah, and along the lines of the offense, I think the way he explained it was that they started off leaning on Fred heavily to start the year to get the bets so that they kept their turnovers down. Because if you watch the Rockets over the past few years, obviously that's been, historically bad. We've been bad in turnovers for 3 years straight, bad in transition. So when you flip that to try to correct that, what ends up happening is, one, you're going to rely on the veteran point guard to make a lot of the decisions, which is what we saw. And then in transition, in order to me, there's a people have this misunderstanding for transition. Some of the fastest teams in the NBA are like the Denver Nuggets, and you see all these teams, they don't have super great athletes. Even the Warriors in their prime, you think of the starters on the Warriors as Steph, Clay, Draymond, Iggy, and they would lead the league in transition, frequency, and all that stuff. The reason I bring that up is transition requires IQ. And
yes,
if you are going to run a lot of transition without the requisite IQ, you're going to turn the ball over like crazy. You're going to not be efficient in it as we were in previous years. So a lot of the reason they didn't run as much as they did is because the guys just weren't ready to run like that. So when you're playing slow, it kind of mitigates some of that because you get the best shot. That's why our pace was so slow, because Ime wanted the team to get the best bucket at the end of each possession. And that's what kept us in a lot of games. Those early season wins, if we played like we played now to start the year, we'd probably be a lottery team. So for them to build up to this point, to what you were saying, it took Fred and some of the vets. It took them to rely on the 2-man between Sengun and and Fred. And what he said was basically, as Jalen developed over the year, he was given more opportunities. So what we didn't get to see early on was the Jalen running the show, because he wasn't ready to run the show. And he still has a lot of growing to do to run the show. So they were just trying to fix the main issues first. In context of all that going on, he was asking Jalen Green to be a more well-rounded player. And this ties into what we want to see from him developing forward. I know there's a lot of people who think that I don't like Jalen, or I'm like a Sengun stan. If you guys watch this channel, I have broken Jalen Green's game down to dust. Since he was a rookie, his shot selection, what he works well in, all that stuff. There's no player on the Rockets I dislike, but if you guys can go listen to Ime Udoka, he's basically echoed everything me and Roosh have talked about all year. He started slow. Mm-hmm. He wasn't hitting his open shots. A lot of the reason he wasn't getting on-ball reps is because he wasn't able to perform at the level they wanted him to do so. He got the on-ball reps, and he played better. And he made this comment, and I think it was either him or Stone that said this, when they asked him, is him and Sengun going to work together? He has to learn to play with great players have to learn to play with each other. If Jalen Green takes the leap as a ball handler, then the potential for the Rockets is highest. This is the easiest player for him to play with, is a center that is skilled and can pass, because it makes his life a million times easier. If it was Jalen and KP,
skilled pass, finish off the roll
screen. And is one of is usually top 10 or 15 in screen assists, even under Steven Silas. So all that to say that for this team, to me, they're going to go as far as those two dudes. But for Ime to really say that he slowed down everything and built it up, I complained throughout this whole process. I'm not going to lie about like our offense. Why are they not running? Why? In retrospect, it makes him look like a genius. Like, the dude looks like a mastermind. And like you said, I couldn't be more like confident in what they're going to do with this team going forward for this year.
Yeah, it's like when you have the game managing. Fred is a game managing quarterback, right? And Jalen is the equivalent of having like the electric young draftee on the bench backup quarterback, and everyone's like, man, we want to see that guy, you know. But in order for that guy to get ready, you had to have the game managing quarterback start the season off and play the first 10, 12 games and kind of get people, you know. And that's what we saw, right? And so like, and then once Sengun went down, obviously, it was, you know, quarterback in football, there's only one quarterback, but on the basketball court, you know, so you just have to accommodate that analogy. But when Sengun went down, it was like Jalen got to go under center, and it's like, boom, all right, now you're ready. And he showed he was ready. But throughout the season, he wasn't, right? And Ime talked about like, you know, if Jeff was having a good game playing against his rival in Denver or whatever the other matchup was, he was like, I was going to play him.
Zion.
Guarding Zion. Yeah. He's like, I was going to play him. He's like, if Holiday, you know, hits 4 or 5 threes, like, I'm going to keep riding him. And that's exactly what you saw. And I think another thing that I took away from Ime saying these things was that he understood from day one that he had to bench Jalen if he was playing bad. He had to do it to prove to him to be like, yo, I'm not playing. I'll do it. Like, Aaron Holiday is going to play over you if he's hitting his threes. I really don't care, you know? And that, I think that sends a message in and of itself of, oh shit, this guy means it, you know? So if I really want to keep my spot, like, you know what I mean? He basically had to prove it. It's like when, you know, when your dad used to slap you on the butt or, you know, pull out the slipper. It's like, yeah, they will actually hit you with it or the belt.
My dad was, and then you're like, he was a big bluffer. When he used to be like a threat. Okay. But to that point, I think one thing Stone said that I fully 100% with this. Jalen's, from what you said about being benched, Jalen's resiliency this year, of all the things that have won me over, because the streak, you know, was great. The defensive leap was, you know, really important for me to see. All that is great. To me, for him to go through how like he played bad, got a lot of scrutiny for it. The off the court stuff with the Drea, the Josh Christopher video, all the weird stuff that was happening, the Roosh situation. No, I'm playing, but but all the stuff that happened, for him to come out of that and still, even for that month play at that level, it shows he has some mental fortitude. And to me, that is a prerequisite in any walk of life. I don't give a damn if you're gonna be a principal or if you can't like really thug it through when things are rough, then you're not gonna make it. And I think for me, that won me more than any scoring, because you could explain away some of the streak stuff, but the mental approach to the game of going through all that and coming out on the other end, I think is the resilience, as what Coach said. I think to me that's probably the most important aspect I've seen of him, and that's what I questioned when he was having and this goes back to last Steven Silas. There was a stretch during the of last season where he looked like he didn't care about basketball. Like he was just out of it, just like no effort. And I really questioned, like, is this dude really about this life? And I think maybe it was the losing was getting to him. I think maybe it was like depressing him. But Ime Udoka sparked something under him, and it's basically pulled out a dog that we thought we drafted. Now he just has to be consistent and translate that to actual basketball on a night-to-night basis going forward for next season.
Still a very, very big question. Let's just be clear about that. Right? Like I'm happy as anyone, because watching him break out in March was like, oh yeah, it's like the end of Shawshank Redemption when Andy Dufresne emerges from the tunnel and he crawls through like a whole mile of shit, and then he pops out and it's like raining and he's cleansing himself. You know what I mean? He's like, I made it. It felt like that. So it would really be unfortunate if we would start next season and like the first 20, 30 games we're getting inefficient, missing shots, 31% from three, blah, blah, blah. So we'll see. But the other thing, and actually to that point, I think Ime said that he was hard on Jalen, and I think he corrected himself, and he was like, maybe harder than I should have been, or like maybe too hard sometimes, something like that. But you could tell, back to what I said, he was very intentional about what he was tearing down and then constructing. And he even echoes that when he talks about, coming to Houston, like choosing Houston, right? He talks about how there were other openings at the time. I think it was Detroit and Toronto. And he basically alludes to the fact that like those weren't very attractive necessarily. And then he talks about how he didn't want to be in a city. He
Yeah,
talks about Milwaukee, I think, and saying like
Milwaukee,
mentions
Philly, and
basically
one
that
more team reached out. That's what he said. Yeah.
yeah, and he talks about how those teams have 2-year windows and instant gratification. You could go there, play with coach a star, whatever, and then the window's over. So you could tell that he really had long term on his mind, right? So everything about him, and maybe some of it he just kind of stumbled into, because he even admits like he wasn't in the interviews with the Rockets. He knew of the talent we had, but he had to really dive deeper into the video and the tape to understand fully like what he was getting into. So he may not have necessarily known it up front, but you could tell that he's very intentional about this whole thing. So it seems like his little kind of masterpiece that he's kind of building up. It's not like some accident that happened, and I think that's the coolest part, because you want the confidence of knowing that the head honcho has a plan. He's up at night like putting this together, and not just kind of showing up to the office and getting it done, right? So that was kind of the main takeaway. Another thing before I forget the quote is that he talks about how there was a learning process for him, and some of that is, like I said, learning the players and all that kind of stuff. But he mentions that along the way he didn't know that Houston was such like a destination for players, and I thought that was really interesting because he played in the league in the mid 2000s. He's coached in the league. He's been in San Antonio, Philly, Brooklyn, Boston. Like, he's no stranger to the NBA. So for him to be surprised that other players saw Houston as an attractive destination, to me was kind of like, oh damn, I guess people didn't really want to come here. So, but yeah, those are like my main, I think, takeaways.
No, I think
Unless we're
that, I mean,
missing
that
something, you
was
tell me.
pretty much the biggest thing. And Ime did talk about the offseason. He's going to be visiting players, saying they might take a trip out to Turkey to see Alp. They're going to be, a lot of the players are going to be in house. I'm hoping Sengun does stay in house because to develop some of that chemistry with the players. I think just overall calming presence to have, and with Rafael. I'm really curious. I think this summer is going to be super interesting for the Rockets, because one thing that he's going to do is that he's going to answer a question and not answer anything. And they did ask him about, is he eyeing any stars? And he said there's no gun to his head. He doesn't feel like they need to get that guy. But I think the Rockets are going to stay aggressive, because I feel like they want to be in that conversation for that. I think Ime does. I think Tillman does. I think Rafael does. So this summer, the pick, we'll talk about all of that, whether we're going to draft the pick. Go ahead.
Well, let me just say the public messaging from the Rockets up until like the last month was,
Right.
yeah, we got assets, we're star hunting. Like that's how it would come from Woj and Shams. And that's obviously how you know what's what, right? So the Rockets have been talking about star hunting,
Patient.
and all of a sudden it's
How
like, well,
much of
maybe we
that
don't
is
need to star hunt.
Jalen's
So,
March? I think a lot of
and
that was, it has to be.
it has to be a good amount. Right? I mean, like, look, I guess we've kind of concluded that Ime, has a lot of say and a lot of pull. So it's going to come down to what Ime wants. And he made the comparison to Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. He also said something later in the presser. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he said something about like the type of player Jalen is, and it was a positive. It was praise. And so if Ime says, "Yo, I want these players," I feel like that's what it's going to be, right? I mean, at one point, Jalen's name may have been dangling. Like, I would, if I'm just guessing, but I would have to guess that Ime thought maybe Ime tried to get through to Jalen, and maybe at some point he was like, "Yo, I don't know. I don't know if it's actually going to work. I don't know if he's able to kind of meet the standards I want." And maybe let's say that was around the trade deadline, because the Rockets were poking around with Brooklyn, and who knows. And then after the break, maybe Ime was like, "All right, there we go. The lights are on. Like, let's really focus on this." I don't know. So we'll see. But I just think it's interesting that the Rockets had been messaging star hunting, and now it's like, nah, we're good. Also, really interesting takeaway, really interesting quote, I should say, is someone asked Stone directly if he thinks he can keep the core six together financially, and he said yes. Like, didn't blink, didn't think twice. He was like, yes. So that's interesting.
Yeah, that's I mean, there's no way to answer that, but that is the first time he's answered something very directly. So they must.
Yeah, which lets you know
It's
that when he doesn't
well,
answer it
when he
directly,
starts stuttering, he's
you know
trying
what
to
I
think
mean?
of the best way not
Because
to
he
answer
didn't.
your question while talking. So he's a master of that.
Correct.
But nah, bro, appreciate the come through, and shout out to all the fans for being patient. We will be back on our regular schedule, not as much because there's not a lot going on in this offseason. But if anything drops with the Rockets, we'll definitely come on and chop it up about it. You guys, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, hit the like button. And Rockets Talk will be back next time. And we're going to keep dropping that.